Assalamu alaikum. My name is Kashif Shahzada, and today I'd like to talk about believers, genuine believers versus fake believers. You see, nowadays it is very commonplace to hear critics, to hear people who are pointing fingers at the Islamic faith, that they identify the behavior of some terrorists or extremists, and they then pinpoint that behavior to be representative of Muslims as a whole. To them, there are believers who are acting in the name of Islam, and whatever those believers are doing, they those beliefs and those practices are what Islam is all about. You see, this is a failure, actually. This is a failure on their part to distinguish between genuine believers and fake believers. When we study the Quran, when we open up the Quran, we find that the Quran has identified two types of believers. There are the true believers, and there are the people who are posing as believers, but they don't have the belief in Allah in their heart. So, just like in a country, you have a marketplace which is flooded with fake goods, which is flooded with counterfeit goods, and at the same time, there are also the authentic versions. There are also the true authentic believers, and there are the fake believers, the inauthentic ones. And just like we should not consider every commodity to be a fake just because a few counterfeits, a few replicas of that commodity exist. We should not consider every Muslim to be a terrorist or every Muslim to be an extremist just because some are doing such acts in the name of Islam. We read in the Quran in Surah Al Baqarah, chapter number 2, verse number 7. Allah says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَقُولُ آمَنَّا بِاللَّهِ وَبِالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. And from the people is he who says, we believe in Allah and the last day. But Allah continues, He says, وَمَا هُمْ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ. But they are not believers. This is Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter number 2, verse number 7. This is a very important verse. Please reflect on this ayah, get hold of your Quran and open it up and just check Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 7. People are saying we are believers. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَقُولُ آمَنَّا بِاللَّهِ وَبِالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. People are saying that we believe in Allah and the hereafter. But Allah is saying, وَمَا هُمْ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ. They are not believers. Excuse me. Why are they not believers? The verses continue. Surah Al-Baqarah, the same surah, verse number 11 says, sorry, apologies. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ لَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ. And when it is said to these people, do not spread disorder in the land, do not do mischief in the land. What do they say? قَالُوا إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ مُصْلِحُونَ. Most surely we are but reformers. We are doing Islah. So this is their identity. That why are they not believers? Because they do what the Quran calls as Fasaad fil ard, as spreading mischief in the land, disorder in the land, and at the behest of Islah or reform. They think that if we can throw bombs, then perhaps this is what will reform society. And the Quran says that they are not believers. People who think like that, people who think that we can do fasad fil arz, we can do disorder on the land, and we can modify or correct the land, correct society on the basis of violence, Allah says, وَمَا هُمْ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ, that such people are not believers. So one's claim to Iman or belief in Allah is immediately dismissed if such a person resorts to Fasaad, disorder in the land, damage to life and property. You see, violence is not a methodology of Islam. Islam is given by peaceful means through da'wah, by inviting people to Allah, by winning hearts and minds, by making people friends, by being a good, righteous person, by helping your neighbors, by making society better through your conduct. This is the methodology of Islam. This is the prophetic sunnah. This is how Islam spreads. But there are people who are throwing bombs, who want to commit acts of terrorism. And they are saying that, well, we are the believers. You see, Allah dismisses such people. He says very clearly that وَمَا هُمْ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ, such are not believers. So when we study Islam, we should make a distinction between those who claim to be believers and resort to acts of violence and those who are claiming to be Muslims and who are living their lives peacefully. This is a very important distinction, and the two should not be merged into one. The Quran also cautions us about some preachers. You see, the Quran is the book of Allah. Allah knows beforehand what type of people there will be, and He is prophesying about those people. But what we read in the Quran through Kalam Allah, through the word of Allah, that phenomena will always exist. And by virtue of these ayat, we can identify that does such a preacher exist in the world? It is in Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter number 2, verse 204. Allah says, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يُعْجِبُكَ قَوْلُهُ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. And of the people is he whose speech will amaze you, whose speech will amaze you concerning the life of this world. وَيُشْهِدُ اللَّهُ عَلَى مَا فِي قَلْبِهِ, and he makes Allah to be a witness over what is in his heart. وَهُوَ أَلَدُ الْخِصَامِ, yet he is the most contentious of enemies. He is the most fiercest of opponents. Who is making amazing speeches using the name of Allah? That person. The preacher. The preacher who is using the name of Allah and who is spreading disorder. The next verse, 205, it continues, وَإِذَا تَوَلَّى, when he turns away, سَعَى فِي الْأَرْضِ, he strives in the land, لِيُفْسِدَ فِيهَا وَيُهْلِكَ الْحَرْثَ وَالنَّسْلَ, that he may spread disorder in it, and he may destroy the vegetation and the cattle. Wallahu la yuhibbul fasad, and Allah does not love fasad or disorder. So here is a preacher who is using fasad as a methodology. He is using the name of Allah. The verse says, وَيُشْهِدُ اللَّهُ عَلَى مَا فِي قَلْبِهِ. He makes Allah over a witness over what is in his heart. But he is resorting to fasad, disorder in the land, mischief. He's spreading disorder. He's committing acts of terrorism. So we should be cautioned. We should be aware of such believers. They are fakes. Why are they fake? Because they are resorting to fasad. They are not following the methodology of Islam as Allah has revealed in the Quran and as was taught by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when we see the Quran, we will see that people have been identified within it who are merely using the name of Allah to endorse themselves, endorse their speeches. They are labeling themselves as Islamic. They are doing things in the name of Islam. But this does not establish their genuineness, their bona fide. It is by virtue of behaviors. It is by virtue of behaviors and not labels that we should distinguish people. When those who call for reforming society resort to violent means, then they are not genuine believers in God, but they are fakes. If one possesses the peaceful behavior of a believer, as narrated by God in His book, then and only then does he fit the label. So, we see that today the words Islam and Muslim are used carelessly as an appendage to individuals committing even the vilest of deeds. The Quran makes it amply clear that every claim in the name of God is not from God. Every deed meted out in the name of righteousness is not righteous. So we owe it to our well being that we do not take each and everything that is hurled towards us in the name of Allah, in the name of Islam, to be actually coming from Allah. We have to take guidance from the Quran by ourselves and see the type of behavior that it has endorsed and the type of behavior that it has resented. By the behavior, people are identified, not by the labels or the claims that they make. Thank you for listening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.